we are now recording. All right.
Okay. So this is an interview with Andra Horton and Juliana Stevens, also known as Andy and Julie. Um, I am Pat McPherson, and I'm conducting the interview with Susan Creighton. We are partners in our business Narratives, which creates archival collections for individuals, families, and organizations. Today is March 15th, 2021, and we're interviewing Andra Horton and Juliana Stevens. We're using Zoom to record the interview, and I am in Montague, Massachusetts. Susan is in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Andra is in Marlboro, Vermont. And Juliana is, can you just fill in where you are, Juliana?
I'm in Alsted, New Hampshire.
Alsted, New Hampshire. The complete audio interview and this video introduction will become part of the Marlboro Morris Ale Archive, which will reside permanently at the Vermont Folklife Center in Middlebury, Vermont. We'd like to establish who is speaking. So, Andy, could you introduce yourself and just say one sentence describing your connection to the Marlboro Morris Ale? Go ahead.
Okay. I am Andy Horton, or Andra Horton, and I am a founding member of Marlboro Morris and Sword, and a one of the founding originators of the Marlboro Morris Ale.
Thank you.
And Squire Emeritus of the team.
Okay, and Julie, you go ahead and do the same thing.
I'm Juliana Stevens. I'm a founding member of Marlboro Morris and Sword, and I am foreman of Marlboro Morris and Sword, have been since Andy handed it over a gazillion years ago.
Awesome. This is interview number 2 with both of you, in which we will be discussing the evolution of the Marlboro Morris Ale from about year 5-ish. Now, I think we sent these questions to you beforehand and gave you a little heads up on the kinds of things we'd like to talk about today. So last time we went from, conversations, meetings, and the first few times that the ale was held. And so now we're a few years in, and maybe one of you could talk about how your organizational structure is evolving.
Are you going, Andy?
Yeah, so I know we talked a little bit about this last time, but the structure of the ale still, let's see. I would say in December, an ale, anybody who was interested would get together and decide on the teams who were going to come to the ale. Is that right, Julie? December, I think?
About that.
Yeah. And then
we put our invitations out by the beginning of January.
Yeah. And those we had first round, second round, and those were based on a very strong aesthetic of what we wanted to see happen at the ale. The interviews were sent out in January, and most people got them back pretty soon. Some people did not. Some teams did not. We had to chase them down. We still had the same structure in the team of basically a few people doing all of the work in the foreground, the work of getting permissions, setting the tours, getting permissions, doing the advertising, setting up any things that needed to be set up in advance. And then everybody else was pretty much under Julie's guidance for signing up for jobs. that happened during the ale. So is there another part to that question that you were hoping to get to?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so at this point, it's still Marlboro Morris, men's side and women's side.
It's still Marlboro Morris and Sword, men and women.
And the men and women together are in charge of the organization of the ale. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Because I know at some point this changes, but.
Right. But at year 5, probably year 3, there was the structure had been set so that each year when we met to do things, it wasn't like it was things were new and different. It was we pretty much knew what we were going to be doing in December. We knew what had to be done.
I will say that it was probably, so the first ale was 76. It was probably in 70, maybe 79, that we had our first dinner inside in the dining hall. I don't think we did a potluck for more than 2 years, possibly 3. What is your?
We did the pig roast twice. What did we do that 3rd year?
I think we hired the college kitchens and we had it inside. And one of the questions you asked was when the skits started, and I think it started as soon as we moved inside and had a meal being served to us. Well, yeah, we didn't have it served to us. We had to serve it.
A potluck that was not a potluck. Excuse me, a buffet. We didn't have to do all the cooking.
Yeah.
Nice. And this was happening on Saturday night originally? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. When you say
the reason behind that, I just want to tell you that the reason behind that was that we felt as though teams were still beginning to get to know each other. That we were, we had the morning show. Some teams went off and toured in Brattleboro together, and then we had the evening show in Brattleboro, and then the feast. And so we were still coming together as a community and getting to know people. And that way, when you went out to dinner on Sunday in Brattleboro or wherever you went, you might have met some new people that you would want to go out and schmooze with.
I have questions.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about we got together in December, you know who you're talking about, but we don't know what we means. So can you just tell us who the people were who were part of that group who got together in December?
That was Marlboro Morris and Sword, men and women, those who wished. So most of the men's and the women's team got together to make these decisions. But it was so it was, as I was saying, it wasn't just the big 4 or 5 who were doing things at that point. It was the whole group.
And how many people was that?
Scads.
Yeah, I mean, it could, if everybody showed up on both the men's and the women's sides, it might have been 30 people.
So 30 people making decisions really doesn't usually work very well. So
it wasn't ever 30 people, though. It was, I would say normally it was, Fred and Dinah, Tony and me, Julie, Susan and Stephen, John Roberts, Steve Adams. There were some people who were Will Fielding, who were invested, and they were there. Mary Sargent. Some people just didn't care, or they said in advance, I can't make this meeting, but I really want to put in a plug for blah, blah, blah.
Right. Jonathan Morse tended to be there.
Jonathan, yeah.
Yeah. Mickey Marcus. I don't know. I can go over lots of names, but
yeah.
Mickey Marcus.
Mickey Marcus. Yep.
Okay. I mean, it's normal that some people rise to the top and take over. You know, the ones who are interested and have the time and energy to actually do the organizing. And so I think I just wanted to know who those people were, other than the both of you. Andy, a little while ago, you said that you were choosing teams by, guided by your strong aesthetic. And I wondered also if you were thinking of the social aspect, like which by this point in time, were you choosing from among a number of teams and not inviting some and inviting others? Were there enough teams around that you could do that?
Oh, very definitely. Yes. Yeah, very definitely. And the strong aesthetic was, it was a juggling act, and it definitely included our friends because it was our party.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely included strong Morris dancing because that's what we wanted to see. And it included new teams because we wanted to provide inspiration. And then it provided teams with strong personality who gave a flavor to the ale, such as Newtown. They keep coming up over and over again. So you need to do some interviewing with them.
Yeah.
And it provided, and then there were, other teams that we didn't want to block them out. So we rotated them through.
Okay.
But those were very difficult decisions after the third year.
Very, very difficult.
First and second year it was basically everybody invited. Those who returned their things first sort of came. Well, that's not true. The first year it was everybody, but by the third year, there were a lot of teams. And we had to make a lot of difficult decisions.
There was an explosion in the Morris world. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is this is a tangential question, so I'm afraid to ask it. Were people like coming from the Northeast and moving around? Is that how it was happening?
In many cases, yes, but Pinewoods was doing, you had everybody at Pinewood. You just had more teachers teaching, more, I don't know. I don't want to say more teachers teaching it, but more people going to those classes and knowing that they could go off and do their own thing, because that's what people had done.
Who are the teachers?
I think Andy went over those. Who were the teachers at Pinewoods?
Oh, yeah. Before when I said I took my first Morris class from Bob Hyder, it was Bob Giard, Giaard. And so he was a teacher.
Okay.
Arthur Cornelius.
Yeah, I do have those from the first year.
Fred Brunig, KG Casualty.
Okay. Andy, when you were talking, you said the teams were still getting to know one another at this time. How far, like how large a geographical area are we talking about?
I can give you 81. I don't have 80, but by 81, we had Albemarle, Binghamton.
From Virginia?
Yeah, Albemarle was Charlottesville, Virginia. Binghamton from New York. Black Jokers, they were early people and from Massachusetts. Black Sheep from Ontario. Bowery from New York. Court Square from Charlottesville. Forest City from London, Ontario. Greenwich from New York, Bayside, New York. Hogtown from Toronto. King's Essing from Philadelphia. Muddy River from Cambridge, Newtown, Ring of Bells, Westerly from Connecticut, and Windsor Morris.
Rhode Island.
And
I'm sorry, they're from Rhode Island. Some of them
Rhode
are
Island.
from Connecticut.
Yeah.
They were, and Windsor from England. So
yeah.
So
and shortly thereafter, we were getting California teams.
I would say that it was predominantly an East Coast event that stretched up to Canada and down to
Georgia. Briar Rose.
But not normally. They weren't a normal. I mean, I would say it stretched down normally to Bluemont, Virginia. They were regulars, and then we did have Georgia, we had Texas, we had California, we must have had, did we have somebody from Minnesota? We had somebody from Minnesota once. So, just trying to get different geographical locations, but it's a big effort to drive all the way out or to fly all the way out with tents and all that stuff.
And most of those long distance teams, we actually had to let them know either a year ahead of time or September-ish. They had to have time to raise the money to get here. So when we said we let teams know in January, that was the Northeast, Canada, Massachusetts, down in New York, Pennsylvania. They could know in January. But when we mention these others, they needed time.
And when we invited teams from England, we put them up while we were here. We put them up in dorms, and beforehand and afterwards, we put them up in our homes. We organized tours for them in Boston, New York, and various areas, and just made sure that they were well taken care of. So that's kind of an extension of the ale.
Mm-hmm. So Windsor Morris first came when?
81.
81.
And was that the first English team that came?
Yes.
I want to tell you that we're going to be talking to Beth Neal later this week.
Awesome.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So we'll fill in that part of that story from her perspective. A team coming from England for the first time going, whatever reaction she had.
And make sure you ask them about Viking women.
Okay.
She'll tell you, but
okay.
The Valkyrie.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're curious about this cross-pollination between England and the United States at this point. And when did Marlboro go to England?
88? No, 98?
No,
No.
80. 88.
88? Yeah, 88.
10. It was 11.
88.
Yeah, you're 11 or something. Yeah.
Okay, so
88.
So an English team came to you before you went to them.
Yes.
And how did the connection between Marlboro and Windsor happen? How did that invitation come about?
When Tony and I had gone over for the summer of 1979 to film different kinds, Tony was filming. I was interested in what Women's Morris was like, and Roy Dommett had given me the information on Windsor. So I went down and attended one of their practices, had the time of my life, made some really good friends, and said, you have to come to the ale. And they were really interested. And so it got worked out that way. That was the connection.
And what do you think so they arrived from England, from, the place that is birth of the tradition that you're that has been imported to North America. What's the impact of that visit on the people at the ale, would you say?
I would say we were stunned.
They were
More.
fabulous. They were beyond fabulous. I mean, that their Morris was at a level that just blew us away. So I think that was one. But of course, they were women. So in England, they were ignored. They were probably, oh no, not probably. They were better than most of the men's teams over there as far as Morris dancing goes. And that, and they sort of, I think, felt they had to be because they were so ignored. So yeah, they blew us away. And it wasn't because they came from where Morris started. You know, that wasn't, they blew us away because they were fabulous people, but an unbelievable Morris team.
But also, to be fair, I think we all blew them away because, as Julie said, Windsor was a standout in English Morris. And I mean, most of the teams were, they were ring teams, and they were getting together to dance for fun and for beer, and they were sloppy, and they probably were very much like what Cecil Sharp saw and recorded. So, you know, nothing bad on them, but it was just a whole different thing with Windsor. It was a strong, strong performance. And it was what when they came over here, they felt as though they had found kindred spirits because we were trying to do the same thing. And then the same thing when Jarks came over and Lizzie Drippings. I think every English team that has come over here has been really inspired and, to use that word again, stunned by the quality of American Morris dancing.
Well, we brought the best to the ale. I mean, we would have new teams come every year. We'd have at least 3 new teams that had only been around for 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, but still they were ones that we wanted to inspire to be stronger. But the rest of the teams were there because of their strong Morris dancing. So it wasn't like traveling around England and seeing the casual Morris dancers, or it wasn't around like traveling around the US and watching the casual Morris dancers. So we did bring them to a point of strength, as Andy said.
The teams that we ended up inviting over here were also teams that completely wowed us when we were there. I mean, I remember the first time I saw Mr. Dorrick's Morris Men, I thought it was a joke because the accordion player was playing like, I don't know, I'll just choose any tune, say it was Lady's Pleasure. He was, you know, going from side to side with his accordion and playing literally at this speed. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And I just couldn't believe that anybody could dance that slow. But it was, of course, so that they could get up in the air. They needed time to fly. And wow, did they fly. Wow. So, you know, we knew that they had to come over and show everybody what they were doing. Yeah, they were amazing.
So I'm not a Morris dancer. I'm an appreciative audience member, and my appreciation is of, you know, the tightness of teams, the athletic and sort of balletic aspect of the dance, the tightness of the dance together as a team. And then so that's what I appreciate because that's all I've seen. And you are talking about this aesthetic, stylistic difference from what you have just called casual Morris teams. And somehow you folks went with this strong, beautiful aesthetic that you're describing, not with the other way that you could have.
You're frozen on my screen.
Mine too.
Uh-oh. Yeah. I think there we go.
Am I back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now you're back.
Where did you last hear me say something?
That we had chosen to go with a strong aesthetic.
Can you talk about that a little bit? In England, the team that you chose to come over is both a woman's team and doing this aesthetic that you liked, and they are ignored. And there's this other thing growing in North America where your ale is also encouraging and spreading your own choices about how to do Morris dancing. There's a lot to unpack in there. Can you talk about both? I mean, you've had a social and artistic impact, right? And you're choosing to do that. And you're by creating this social event, you're spreading that aesthetic choice. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I want Andy to talk about that, but I just want to say that there were plenty of teams who did not agree with this, that they wanted to just be out there, and they're out there together, and it's the being together and the drinking of, beer together. I don't want to put that in there, but the other ale started up that didn't involve this because there were other aesthetics. So Andy, go ahead.
So that strong aesthetic really came from Tony. He's always been a performer, and he's always wanted to put on the best show possible, and he would not stand for anything less with us. He was a real taskmaster, and and it served us well, I think, in the long run. Even in the short run, I think we all agreed with him. We were there because we were interested in making something beautiful happen. Susan, you want?
Well, it occurs to me that, as you've said too, this is still your private party. This is not you trying to set the tone of the style of Morris dance in America.
Well, yes, and also no. Because I would say Tony very much did have it in his mind to set the style of Morris dance in America. Okay. And he spent a large part of his career doing that, writing books about it and teaching it. And yeah, so I think we bought into that. And as we touched on in the last interview, we have never really been a social team. We don't really get together and have more now than we have in the past. But we haven't gotten together and had Christmas parties and whatever. We get together to dance and to celebrate the dance, and it has worked for some of our team members, and it hasn't worked for some who ended up leaving the team because of it. And so I don't want to denigrate the social Morris or the casual Morris, because there's certainly a place for that in this world of people, you know, just getting together to have fun. And, you know, like Newtown's old motto was every dance a show dance, every meal a feast. And
Every
so
man
they,
a squire.
what?
Every man a squire.
Every man a squire. Yeah. And they, so, you know, they didn't care what they were, they didn't care about the presentation so much. They just cared about having fun doing the dances. So they would pick show dances or the good dances from every single tradition that were fun to do, and they would just dance them. And then they would, you know, they would get together and party and feast. And their feasts, oh my God. Oh my God.
Oh my God, is beyond.
Their feasts were fabulous, just fabulous. So that's a whole other,
Ask about their feast.
Yeah, and we can tell you a little bit about that. And I do want to touch on that at some point when you talk about the organization of the ale.
Let's talk about it
right now.
Talk about it right now. Yeah.
So after we had the so the first time we had our indoor feast with inside the dining hall, Newtown didn't come. They brought their own feast and they cooked it down either on the field and then they cooked it in the field and they served it in the music shed, and it was just Newtown. And then the second year, they did the same thing, even though Tony tried to talk them out of it. And the third year, and somewhere around the third or the fourth year, Tony went down before the feast started to really give them what for, because he felt as though they were taking away from the sociality, so in the society of the ale. And that was the year they were doing a Mexican feast. And they brought, have you heard this story, Susan? They brought Tony in to the feast to show them what they were doing. They put a blindfold on him, and then they invited him to do the piñata, which he did with, you know, good nature and good grace, not seeing the piñata, but just, you know, batting it around and finally getting all the candy and stuff on the floor. And then they unfolded him, and lo and behold, the piñata was Tony. They had made a piñata of Tony. They did not want to be told what to do. They wanted their feasts.
Well, it was their party time.
It was their party time.
Yeah. They were getting together, and this was their team time. And yeah, and the next step after that is they then did not feast per se, but then they opened up and they did cocktail parties and they did breakfasts and they on the field for everybody. So yeah, they became more inclusive to the great enjoyment of all of us. And yeah. But the just going quickly back to the teams and the style of dancing. I mean, one of the reasons for bringing in those new teams was so they could see what strong dancing looked like, and hopefully taking that back. And also bringing in those teams was to help spread the Morris. So Tony really, you know, had that, do I want to say vision, or the four of you getting together? I don't know how much you all thought about that, but was to get the better Morris out and around. And I think in most cases in the US, those who developed that stronger teamwork as opposed to the casual ones were the teams that survived, that kept going, that lasted. Yeah, so that there was more to it, because as Andy said last time, in the set, moving together, the power of that, the endorphins that just you're not just getting the endorphins of exercise, but you're getting the endorphins of teamwork. And that's so powerful. So it, I think it was really important for survival of Morris in the US.
Susan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I want to interject a question here, and I don't know whether this will be relevant and remain in the interview or not, but your story about Newtown is very striking to me, just in the evolution of the ale. As you start to invite more and more teams and they come, I'm thinking, of course, teams are going to start making it their own in some ways and bringing their own personalities to the ale and shaping the character and personality of the event. And I can see how there would be this tug of war between you guys having a vision of what this event is going to be and teams bringing these other hijinks events, their own little twist on what's happening at the ale. And I think it sounds like in a lot of cases those were just sort of embraced and eventually became part of the event. So my question is, was there ever a time when you felt like a team was pushing just a little too far beyond the bounds of what you envisioned and you thought, this doesn't fit at this event?
Yeah. Julie, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I remember there were some field events that I only heard about that were very much frowned upon.
Well,
and if you prefer not to talk about that, that's fine. We could sort of leave it right there. But if you want to, go ahead and we can decide later what we want to include here.
Well, what do I want to say? I mean, there, when the teams come to the ale and the early ones, when everybody cooked most of their meals on the field, they would, I mean, they brought the stuff for themselves, and they were, what do I want to say? Some were very welcoming for you to go around. And as I said, one of my best jobs was collecting trash on the field. I mean, I didn't sign up, but when nobody signed up for it, it was like, you guys don't understand. You get to go to every activity that is happening on the field because you have to collect what they're having and, all their garbage and get it out of there. Anyway, so it was fine when they were welcoming, but not so fine when they sort of said, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing, and anyway, we'll say some specifics without saying names at another time, but anyway, that's. But for the most part, people brought in really incredibly good energy and parties. I mean, the cocktail parties, Ring of Bells did cocktails. Halfpenny did, invited all to cocktail parties.
Rock Creek.
Oh my God, the parties. Anyway, so they're, for the most part,
all women, mind you.
Well, but that's the Newtown. I mean, Newtown outdid everybody.
Yeah.
But so for the most part, it sort of became a thing, and you had to say, oh my gosh, we want to have a cocktail party, but what time is available, because who's doing what, and what. So for the most part, it was fabulous.
But I do remember one time, and I don't remember the team's name, which is probably just
good.
as well.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember that it involved late night explosions.
Oh, yeah.
They were setting off something or other, and I think that was kind of hard to deal with. I think I might have been ale master, or at the time. It was hard to deal with because it was disrupting the town of Marlboro. It wasn't just, it was no longer our party, but it was taking our party out into the world and making other people suffer for it. On another, in a similar vein, I remember the first or the second ale, when we had very drunken Morris dancers peeing on somebody's lilacs on Sunday at Newfane. And then, having to deal with things like that. And then, another year, there were people who were, and still do, but, I'm not on the ale committee anymore, walking through the streets of Brattleboro with brown paper bags, or jaywalking, or doing things that were just not okay for the community. And so, that definitely pushing the limits and just doing what, just not being a little bit drunk and not as respectful as we would have liked people to be. So, yeah, I mean, we had to deal with that.
There were times that, it had to be mentioned that, yes, there were a million of us down in Brattleboro, but, well, somebody was arrested for peeing in the parking lot. It just, they weren't going to give us the permits if we didn't follow the standard rules of the town. So yes, those kinds of things did have to be mentioned. I think it was mostly mentioned at the Squires meeting, right? And the Squires were supposed to take that back to their team.
Tipping in the pubs and just, all sorts of things that are conventions, social conventions that we had to remind people.
And that was a learning thing for us with English teams coming, because they don't tip and, they drink. And when we first realized that they had left the pub without tipping, that was, the ale committee had to go back and tip the pub. That happened more than once. It did. That was a learning experience, both for us and for the British teams.
Wow. You talk a lot about the field, and maybe it would be useful to talk about the geography of the site and how the geography affected, the organization of the ale, the social things that were happening or not happening. You want to go ahead on that one?
The field. That's where the excitement is. I do want to say one thing about, because I think we really need to. So Tony was upset with Newtown doing their own party. However, when for the British teams came, we would, starting with Jorix, we must have done it. No, anyway, certainly with Jorix, maybe with Windsor. We put them up in the dorms, in the dorm that we stayed in, and we fed them whatever. So we had our own little party. We were also isolating in that sense, because we did the cooking for them, and we got to know them much better than many other teams, because they were not on the field. They were not camping. So I just want to say that it wasn't just other teams that did some isolating moves. So did we, in a very selfish way, because we wanted to get to know those teams. So now back to the field. So we started early on. We all camped. Those who were not Marlboro people. We're not.
Would you want to just take a little step back and describe the geography of the college? Yeah. So I'll just do that, and then I'll hand it over to you with the camping on the field. Okay, so it was on the campus of Marlboro College, which is on a hill. At the very top of the hill, almost at the top of the hill, was the dining hall where we did a lot of our congregating. And we started and gathering. There were also some dorms. We were allowed 2 dorms at first, only 1 dorm, and then we were allowed 2 dorms down one of the roads from the dining hall. And then down the hill, there was a big, there's a music shed where the music festival does its concerts, and a big soccer field. And after the second ale, that's where we started to camp. That's also where we did the show dancing, on the soccer field. And in later days, they built a student center where up a little above the dining hall, where we had the pub. But for many, many years, the pub was either in a little room off the dining hall, or in a tent outside the dining hall. And so it was a natural separation of things. The people who were in the dorms were pretty far separated from the field. So anyhow, go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, so the field, at the beginning, you camped all the way around the outside of the field because we were going to be dancing around the maypole in the middle, and so that space was available. For the most part, teams camped together. So this was Toronto's spot, and it was always Toronto's spot from the time they first came. That was their spot. In days when very few people from Marlboro camped on the field, I tended to camp with Toronto for lots of reasons. But so there were some outliers who went in. Andy's smiling. There were outliers that went into different groups, but people tended to be in the same place, and they tended to be in the same place year after year. So these little groups. So you basically knew where Newtown was going to take over that section of the field. And so you watched to see what they were setting up. What did it look like? What was it going to be this year? So yes, the social side of the field, new teams just sort of came in and sort of went wherever, but there were those who went to their section of the field and set themselves up, and you knew they were there, and that was great. So, and then in the early years, actually for many, many years, everybody, even after we started doing the feast, still people did their own breakfast on the field. We had some tents, and people were bringing their own cook stoves. They were bringing their own everything. And so some teams had quite elaborate setups and some not. And so people would meet under those tents and do a lot of chit-chatting as they cooked their meals. And then and some teams would have the mimosas, and you knew that they were there, and as you went around in the morning, you could drop in and they would give you pick you up for the day.
Or bring me down.
Right. So that was really the heartbeat of the ale, was the field. That was where you got to know each other, you got to interact most informally, and you got to know each other.
And I will say that, even though you didn't ask this question and it's later on, but I will say that once we started to provide breakfasts, so all meals, that I believe a lot of that congeniality of the field disappeared. And it just, it became a place to go to sleep, or a place for an alternate pub sing if there were too many people taking over the pub sing in the pub. But mostly, it was the meals that pulled people, the meals and the little celebrations that pulled people together on the field.
Yeah, and they were really important for people. They were very important for the people at the beginning. And I wonder if we didn't have to do that, if the ale would in fact have the life that it has, because that's where the stories came. That's where so many memories were made. Were on the field, and now they give us more dorms. Well, they just tore some down, so who knows what's going to happen in the future. But more people, you're getting older, more people are staying in the dorms, fewer people are on the field, and Toronto goes to bed earlier, so the sings aren't aren't happening as long. But yeah, so now we have the feast now, and yes, you can sit anywhere you want at breakfast, but how many people are actually table hopping? Not, not that many. So it was so important.
And how long was what you're describing, Julie? How long did that last? When did the changes happen?
Good question. So we started serving breakfast. Whoa, Andy, help me out. 18, 19, something like that. It was right towards the end of our time.
We did the ale for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was at 20. I think just, or might have been at 19. I think just at the tail end of our reign was when we stopped having. We started the bus touring. We stopped. We stopped having the people. We stopped having drunken people driving all over Windham County. We put everybody on a bus, so they could, So, and it was also much more friendly. And we had the breakfast. I think that was for the 20th. I think it was the celebration of the 20th, but I'm not going to swear to that.
So 1996, 7.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And the buses got the people off the roads, the drunken people off the roads. But when Albemarle first came, they came up in what are those huge caravans called? Winnebagos. They came up in 2 Winnebagos, one of which broke down on their way up, and they had to have a different one delivered to them. And when we danced with them, on Sunday, we were in their Winnebago and driving around, and that was just fabulous. You really got to know the people, because we could be all over it. It was a living room, and so we knew what a difference it was to be able to travel with a group, and this was long before we did buses. And Andy, this is later than what you're asking for now, but it should be, Andy, if you remember who did all that work on the buses, that would be an important person to pat on the back, who talked to the bus company and got the people, and we'll go back to where you want to be. But I will say that we have bus drivers who have been with us practically from the very first year for 20 years. They love driving us for the ale, and they fight to get that job. So it isn't just us who love it, the bus drivers love it as well. So, but we can go back to 5 to 10 years because we're way beyond that.
Go ahead, Susan. I'm just typing some things in.
Sure. Well, I also want to note we're about 5-10 minutes away from the end of our hour. Maybe what you guys could do, just sort of stepping back to a more aerial view for a moment, is just give us a rough sense of the timeline of when the change happened from the ale being organized by the men and the women to, was it organized just by Marlboro Morris and Sword at a certain point, and then at some point it shifts to a committee? Can you sort of just give us that arc?
I want to say it was the 10th ale that we did together. And
That's correct.
Yeah, that was the last ale we did together. And by that time, the men had split apart from us, or we had split apart from the men, or however you want to say it. And then we took it over until we didn't want it anymore, which was the 20th ale. We really pushed ourselves to do 20 ales. And at that point, I remember after maybe 1 or 2 ales of not doing it, I remember Will Fielding saying to me, you know, you really should try and give it over to somebody else, because it's a wonderful experience just going to the ale and not having to organize it. And I think, you know, that idea just kept niggling and niggling and growing and growing. And by 20, we really we'd had enough. So we handed it over to the men. We handed it back to the men, the Marlboro men, who were not the classics anymore. They were the Amherst Marlboro men, or the Valley Boys, as we like to call them, as I like to call them. And then I don't know how long they did it.
Not
Maybe
long.
Yeah, it didn't take them long to figure out that they didn't want to do it alone. And then they opened it up to a committee. But you might have to ask them a little bit about it. And unfortunately, Will Fielding and Steve Adams are no longer around to ask. Fred DeBecca might be able to give you some insight on that. And Steve Howe might be able to give you some insight on that. And Rhett, definitely Rhett. Yeah, definitely Rhett.
And the question may have come across at 10 when we split. Why did the women take it over, not the men? The men split, and they split from themselves. When they split, they invited a certain group of them to go with them, and other members of the team who were in many cases the husbands of our dancers. They did not invite. So there was another split there. So it wasn't just the men went and the women went, and either one of us could have taken over the ale. It was really that the men split from us, and then the men split from the men. And so it was really in the women's hands. The other thing is, come on, we're organizing. Who does the work when a group is organizing? I'm sure it was just plain too scary for the men even to think about it, quite honestly.
We don't know that for sure. That's opinion.
It's opinion, but also who was doing what work.
Yes, we were doing the lion's share of the work.
Yeah, I mean, we were always, first Dinah and then me, the treasurer of it, the bagman of the ale. I mean, that's a huge thing to take over. And as
enormous.
Far as what's that?
Enormous.
Enormous. But then anyway, the women were the ones who organized the jobs. The women were.
Susan did all the registration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I did all the tours and the permission, and it had always been that way.
Yeah.
So, is that Susan Leuchter?
That's Susan Leuchter. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I was always in charge of the job. So it was the women who were comfortable in these jobs, and the men who would have had to have a very heavy learning curve, even though they were there and they were doing a huge amount. don't get me wrong, but they weren't the person who was helping tell them what to do.
So what were the men doing while you were doing the registration, bagmen, and organizing the tours?
Oh, you mean and the publicity and anyway. For the most part, well, I mean, Tony was always an overall head, Tony and Fred. And others, you know, they would be setting up the pub, they would be moving things. So they did a lot of the
heavy lifting.
Yeah. Literally
setting up the maple, clearing the music shed, putting the signs in, registration here, foot up, all those things, setting up the pub. Yep, that they did that.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Hey, they ever cleaned bathrooms though?
Even though they were signed up.
Right.
Oh my God.
But we didn't say that. So, well, yeah. So that was the transition, and don't think there's a lot more to say on that. Unless you have a specific question.
That I was writing some notes. That transition was at 10 years in.
11, yeah, between 10 and 11.
Where the women officially took over, the team split, and the men split from themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's when Marlboro Morris and Sword became a women's team, and Marlboro Morris Men was the men's side.
Okay. I think.
And just one other thing, Marlboro Morris and Sword, the men's sword team was never really officially part of Marlboro Morris and Sword. So the men's team was really its own entity. And not that they were part of us, but they really liked the fact that they were their own piece.
Okay. Susan, what do you think about sort of stopping here? And I don't know, I feel like you two could keep on talking for hours and we would not have touched on everything that we could touch on. Susan and I will have to talk about how to deal with this.
Right. I guess I have a question at this point.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a number of different things. Are there significant points of the history of the evolution of the ale that you guys would still like to talk about that have not yet been touched on?
I think you've done a pretty good job. I think what you need to do, I'm sure this is your plan, is go off and talk to all these other people and then see if you want to come back. See if there were, wait a minute, you said this, they said that, what's, anyway, because you're right. No, Andy and I've been there. And, if you want to talk about the next 20 years and how much we've enjoyed not working at the ale, well, that's not quite true. I've worked at every ale, but
right.
But by choice. But yeah, I think you should talk to others and then see if you want to come back, because not being an organizer is really what the ale is about. So if you really want to get to Marlboro Morris, the ale, you need to talk to the other teams.
That was kind of my sense, is that we might be about at that point, but I wanted to make sure we hadn't left out something that we didn't know about that you guys wanted to share. So,
and when you hand us the video for us to look at again, something may come up, but I can't think of anything now. As Julie said, I think you've done a really good job asking questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, did singing in the pub start early and continue on? And did it lose a lot when it went up to that student center because the room wasn't anywhere near as nice and as whatever? Yeah, there are all those things, but other people can tell you about that.
Right.
Anyway, so there are those kinds of things that we don't need to talk to you about, and more people can give their idea.
Yeah, if you want to know if you want to know about the pub, you should probably talk to Alistair or Ian, because they will have a very different view of the pub than John Mayberry. And both of them are valid, but you should just if you want to know a history, the chronology starts with Alistair and Ian.
And then you need to go to Natty and Erica, because it is.
Yeah, because that's where it's evolved to.
That's where they are. It is now.
Sweet. Despite what you've just said, I would like to talk to both of you about the splits that happened around year 10, because you were there. And we may not do it right away. We may go and, as you suggest, talk to other people. But I think I'm going to want to come back to that point in time. I think it's an important sociological split, as well as, having an effect on the organization and feel of the ale.
You know what? It would be fascinating. I would love to, I hope that when you talk to people, find out how they felt about the split. What did they think was different about it? I think that's more fascinating than us talking about it, because we just continued on. We didn't say, oh, good, we got rid of them, now we're going to do something totally different. We lost a lot without having the men's creative ideas on some things. So, but for how other people felt that, did the ale lose something when a whole bunch of the people stopped being the organizers? Did it gain something? So of the old timers who were still around, the Mitch Diamonds, those who've been around for some of these teams,
John Dexter,
well, a lot of TVI, almost all of TVI.
TVI?
Thames Valley International. Those would be the people that I think would be a more fascinating discussion than with us. So ask them, then you can come back and ask us if there's something that you are still thinking of being interesting.
It will be equally fascinating, because I think one of the things we're trying to do is we're gathering your perspective on a lot of these things, but we've also been making notes about things you've talked about, that when we interview other people, we want to say, talk to us about the same thing, so that we get different versions and different perspectives on the same kind of events.
Yeah,
great for people to be able to see in the collection.
We do absolutely have to talk to you, and we will talk to those other people. Your words and perspective are going to be really important to the whole story.
Sure, but theirs are too, because the ale was nothing without the teams who came and made the party. I said that before, but it's completely, absolutely true. It's they were the special ones.
Yep.
It's fascinating. You think you start off, you think you're just having a party, and it turns out there's so much from that seed has grown.